Just when it seemed like James Harden had no choice but to stay with the Philadelphia 76ers, a new variable has entered into the equation after James Harden said this in front of his camp. Welcome back, everybody, to The Board, the NBA content division of the Hammer Betting Network. And it's been pretty dry with NBA information in the months of, well, late July and the start of August. But finally, some newsworthy information has dropped regarding the James Harden saga. This NBA offseason has been a little bit slower than others. I mean, last season, the whole Kevin Durant saga really took over the entire summer just for nothing to really happen out of the situation. And this summer, maybe a little bit of a rude awakening to James Harden, perhaps his fan base, because James Harden doesn't claim nearly as much media attention as Kevin Durant did last summer. And I mean, based on the way James Harden played, especially in the playoffs last season, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. But nonetheless, we've all been curious as to exactly where James Harden was going to end up this season. And this all started right around the start of NBA free agency, where James Harden, he had the option to become a free agent, but instead decided to take on his player option with the Philadelphia 76ers. This would usually be the indication of somebody wanting to stay with their current team. I mean, taking a contract to stay when the option to leave for free was a weird situation, but the reality was the market around the league for Harden wasn't very strong, and it wasn't nearly strong enough for other teams to frantically clear out cap space to provide James Harden that contract in free agency. So taking that player option with the Philadelphia 76ers allowed for teams to then salary match in any sort of trade to acquire James Harden, knowing though it would be on a more or less rental contract where James Harden only has 1 year left, of course, because it was a player option that he signed. He made it very clear after the fact that he wanted to trade away from the 76ers, but the 76ers, I mean, they understand the value of James Harden, even if it is for another year. They weren't really rushing to trade him, especially with general manager Daryl Morey, who seemingly had a great relationship with James Harden. They've worked together, especially, well, right now in Philly. They worked extensively together in their time with the Houston Rockets, mostly successfully over there. So everything seemed fine as far as Morey and Harden went, but that all really changed here. In the last week or so, the 76ers made it clear to the media that they're not getting the offers that they want for James Harden. They are better off just keeping him for another season, seeing what can play out, putting James Harden beside Joel Embiid, putting maybe some good players around it. What could happen with that? You know, maybe Tyrese Maxey makes a jump. Maybe injuries break their way. Maybe the draw breaks their way in terms of the layout in the Eastern Conference. Who knows what could happen when you put talented players on your team? They were just going to stick with James Harden for another year. But James Harden is trying to make it that is not going to happen. James Harden wants out now. And if the 76ers aren't going to be willing to trade him, well, James Harden may still have some other plans. Let's take a look in on exactly what James Harden had to say in this video here.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of.
That comment that he made there was met by a resounding amount of cheers from the camp here. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be part of an organization that he's a part of. Crazy after the relationship, the long relationship that the two have had in the NBA. But before I go deeper into this, I just wanted to kind of say here, is James Harden really doing this in front of a camp with a lot of like kids, teenagers here? Is James Harden really sounding off about his NBA career in front of all these kids? Like, I think there are better ways to convey your message around. Like, I think there's better ways. You know, you can put it in the media, put it to your agent, get your agent to do it, a publicist to do this, but not the best way as a player who already has been deemed as pretty undesirable for trade and for a big contract. Pretty crazy for a player like that looking to maximize his value, making comments like that. And that obviously is going to make it a little bit more difficult for the Sixers to trade him because, well, if he does this in private, maybe the Sixers can explore more trades. But, you know, maybe the relationship was broken. Maybe the Sixers are like, we are not trading you. That's final. And James Harden had no other option but to call out Daryl Morey in the media in order to force his hand and get a trade away from the team. At least that's what you could possibly expect from this situation. But very recently, Daryl Morey sounded off on this video because he obviously saw it. And the comments coming from Daryl Morey, you can't really see it in the top right here, but I'll read it out. Daryl Morey is, quote, unmoved by James Harden's comments and still plans to keep him, according to Jason Dumas over here. So Daryl Morey still keen on keeping James Harden, still keen on trying to make the relationship work. But I mean, how many times do we really have to see this with James Harden? It's not like last year with Kevin Durant. This is what Daryl Morey's trying to be after James Harden directly calls him out, directly drops him by name as a liar. You just can't really do that. When it came to Kevin Durant last season, at least with Kevin Durant, you have a much more stand-up sort of figure. Yeah, Kevin Durant has bailed on some teams, but he's always been very upfront about it. He's been very open about it, and he's been very accepting with his teams. The Brooklyn Nets conveyed to Kevin Durant, look, when Kevin Durant wanted a trade, they said to Kevin, we're not getting the value that we think we deserve out of you, and we want to keep you. We have to keep you here. We have a good team here. We want to put this behind us. We can't trade you for what people are offering. Let's try to get something out of this. And then once Kyrie Irving got traded away, then, okay, they reopened negotiations and got a massive haul for Kevin Durant at the end of the day from the Phoenix Suns. For James Harden, it's a little bit different because he's not going to command a massive return out of this situation. And James Harden, how many times has he been the one to just step away from a team and back out when the going gets tough? When the going gets tough, James Harden gets going. When it comes to elimination games in the playoffs, when it comes to the situation that was brewing in Brooklyn, maybe he was right to leave early here, but with the Philadelphia 76ers, I mean, part of the reason that they had that playoff, I wouldn't call it necessarily a failure. I didn't expect them to get past the second round, but part of the reasons they once again crumbled in elimination games at the playoffs was down to some more poor performances from James Harden at the end of the day. I mean, he has a track record. Some of it maybe goes a little bit too far, but a lot of it is warranted on James Harden and his ability to produce specifically in games, in elimination games. There was the opportunity to close out the series against the Celtics in Game 6 at home. James Harden wasn't himself, and I think it was yet another in Game 7, yet another 2 for 11 performance in Game 7 against the Boston Celtics, an elimination game. James Harden's trademark elimination game, for some reason, it's uncanny how often he goes 2 of 11 in these elimination games. So as far as this whole James Harden trade saga is concerned, I mean, Daryl Morey, you're not going to win. You're not going to win this. How many times did James Harden had gotten his way out of all these? Morey is not going to get his way. So in order to alleviate any further damage, you may have to just trade James Harden. But that comes, again, a bigger question if you trade him. What happens to your superior star in your team in Joel Embiid? Because with Joel Embiid, how much longer can he take of this? And to be, I'll be fair on James Harden here. A lot of the playoff failures of the 76ers, since they started the process, they started the process the season after their team lost in the second round of the playoffs. And in the 10 years since the process began, they have not gotten any further than that team that was the reason they started the trust the process era and really the era dominated by Joel Embiid. And a big reason why they have not gotten past the second round, sure, Ben Simmons was part of it, but Joel Embiid has also consistently failed to deliver in the biggest games. I mean, him against the Boston Celtics, this guy went into hiding in the fourth quarter of that Game 6 where they could have closed out the game and was poor in that Game 7 against the Boston Celtics. He threw Ben Simmons under the bus in that Atlanta Hawks series, but a lot needs to go on Joel Embiid himself. I will give him credit. After this year's elimination, he did put a little bit of criticism against himself, but ultimately with this 76ers team, I'm talking now about Joel Embiid, and I'm talking about his patience potentially starting to run a little bit thin. If Harden leaves, this team is in a tough spot. Still with that Tobias Harris contract only for one more year. Yes, they have Tyrese Maxey, but the depth has gotten worse than it was last year. That was the best Sixers team that Joel Embiid had since 2019. The depth is a lot thinner. If Harden goes, the talent level is going to drop. And Tobias Harris is a solid player. He's not worth $40 million, but Tobias Harris is a decent player who's also going to be leaving at the end of the season. The Sixers have to work very hard to replace him. I don't know. I think the Joel Embiid situation is a ticking time bomb before potentially even he, as the reigning MVP right now, I think there's a potential down the road where he decides that he wants to move on and find a new team. And that would be a humongous story. But based on everything going on, trouble is brewing in Philadelphia. And this James Harden thing might be the first domino to fall. So let us know what you think about this in the comments on YouTube, or if you're listening in audio form, you can let us know on Twitter at TheBoardHQ. But be sure to drop a like on this if you did enjoy. Make sure to subscribe as well for some more NBA content as we get closer and closer to the start of that new NBA season. We apologize for the hiatus over here, but we're back into full swing on the board. So get involved today.